Good morning, John. Thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Obviously, ESRI is a huge name in the industry. Everyone pretty much does know who you are already, but perhaps if we could talk specifically about what brings you down to DGI today.
Yeah, ESRI is pretty pervasive within the national security community. A lot of the organisations are using our software. We've become this sort of backbone that allows them to fuse all their intelligence sources together. So we're very keen to come down to advise people on some of the evolution of the technology. A lot of companies now are looking at the use of the cloud as a way to reduce some of the expenditure and give them the flexibility in setting up systems, not to have to invest in the capital, but actually fund this through operations. So what I was hoping to do in this conference is really begin to share some of the experiences of how does geospatial work in the cloud, and perhaps try and get beyond some of the hype and share some of the practical experiences.
Absolutely. I think one of the interesting things, everyone talks about the advantages, but obviously there are going to be some disadvantages to essentially off-siting all your data and hosting it with someone that could be thousands of miles away. So what are the challenges that come up in the cloud-based services?
I think for this community, one of the biggest concerns is security. If you don't know where the data is, you don't know what's happened to it. And that's the challenge for the public cloud, where you're basically outsourcing the ownership of the systems and all that to companies like Amazon. Certainly in the US, we're looking at government regulations and standards to allow us to do that. But that doesn't mean you can't have a private cloud. But then there's a lot more complexity, particularly from the security aspects. So security is always the paramount, the top issue that people address. But then when you look at the nature of the geospatial data, the nature of the analysis, a lot of the general hype about the cloud is yet to be validated. And companies like Amazon, who are working with us to host geospatial solutions, are learning a lot of experiences about large data, imagery, geospatial databases, where to put the analysis in relation to the data, what sort of mission critical applications might work and which ones really don't. So there actually are a lot of lessons that are beginning to come out, and what I realized was that there hasn't been a way to share this information very thoroughly in the past. So one of the main reasons we're here is to begin to help people understand how do you get beyond the hype in general with the cloud to the specifics of geospatial in the cloud.
Perhaps if you could tell us a little bit more specifically then about that and how that all is starting to come together, how people are starting to share with confidence.
Well, I think the way to look at it is, when you look at the cloud, there are sort of really three ways people visualize or think about the cloud. One is basically software as a service, and there are now solutions. In fact, Google Maps has been a solution, software as a service, for a long time. You're now beginning to see much more of some of these subscription-based offerings. So things like a business analyst online for companies like Starbucks, or a logistics solution online for people who actually need to route vehicles for dispatch, etc. And then there's the platform as a service, which really is about giving developers the opportunity to build applications where, again, they don't have to worry about all the infrastructure, but the APIs are there. Actually, what's very interesting to me is that the word developer is actually evolving. Users, what we traditionally think is just the person who wants to use the system, is now able to create their own maps, create their own applications through some of the portals that are there. And ultimately, particularly for private clouds, then you're looking at the infrastructure as a service. And Amazon and Microsoft and Terramark and other companies are offering that. The challenge for this community is, again, well, I don't want to buy that service from you. I want to create that infrastructure in my own organization. And that's where you get back to, well, how do I secure that? What are the best practices? Where do I put my databases? So it's still a very complex issue, but people are looking at it from those three tiers, with software as a service, platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service.
Yeah, it does seem that we've seen a very fundamental shift in what people are both looking for and indeed what those people are. As you said, it was very interesting, the idea that developers are now users in the same way, what was it we were talking about yesterday, that analysts are now entirely different types of people, that it's much more to do with understanding the processes that deliver the data rather than delivering those answers themselves.
Yeah, I think you're right. And what we're really seeing is this shift from geospatial technology being a niche area for professionals to actually being pervasive. Everybody has a mobile device. Everybody wants to be able to look at information. And with crowdsourcing and some of those sort of social media, basically now, we used to say every soldier was a sensor. Now we say everybody is a sensor, right? Because everybody can now contribute this information into the system. So the definition of the sort of the user community is just basically expanded. It's global. The other thing you touched on, which I think is another challenge for the industry, is the analysis. You know, the analysts are very specialist people with very strongly developed skills over many years. And one of our challenges is capturing that information. Some of them, like me, are getting a bit old and maybe near retirement. And how do you keep and perpetuate that information? Well, one of the things that we've looked at is being able to capture the sort of analytical processes, the workflow they go through, being able to perpetuate that in a way that it can be shared through a server so that other people can validate that information, can train on that information, and in many cases a generalist who doesn't have any specialist knowledge may be able to run that model in a mobile device. So one of the big challenges for the community is still, we don't just want dots on maps. We don't just want information, what we want is intelligence. So how can we continue to evolve and preserve the analytical capabilities that people have developed and make them available to everybody who's on the network? Those are still that's one of the challenges that we do face. But while we're on the topic of challenges, actually many people will say to us, what is the biggest challenge for geospatial technology? And actually that's not the right question, because the challenge isn't the technology. The technology, like information technology, has evolved so far and so fast now that actually the biggest challenge for our customers is not what can the technology do, it's understanding what the technology can do, which again is why we're here, and then it's managing and governing that. If you think about a cloud organization, that's a huge challenge for a military or an intelligence organization that is used to stovepipe systems where they own the server. Well, now if you have this virtualized world, how do you manage that virtualized world, which is not now just for your organization, but actually for, say, the whole Ministry of Defense? So the biggest challenge we see now is governing the geospatial enterprise. And a lot of people are now looking at their policies, their organizations to enable them to do that. We've seen in the US the creation of an Army Geospatial Center, an Army Geospatial Information Officer who's trying to look across US Army systems rather than just letting them each do it their own way. Because there are huge efficiencies and benefits if they can actually have an enterprise system. But the governance required to do that is not something that they've traditionally looked at.
Yeah, it does feel like we've gone through this growth period where all the different companies have set up their own stovepipes, as you were saying, but actually we've got, which is what people wanted at the time, because
right.
We wanted people to specialize, we wanted people to get really good at what they do. Now we've got all these people offering all these different systems and viewpoints. We now need a way to bring it all together in a way that one person can look at and actually make sense of.
Well, and again, great insight, because what's actually happened in the US, and I'm based in Washington, so I work very closely with the Department of Defense and especially the US Army. What you've had is, particularly in the Army intelligence community, is separate systems designed to deal with each of the separate intelligences. So signals intelligence, imagery intelligence, geospatial intelligence, each had a separate system. But what people want to do is to fuse that and do the analysis together. So there's actually a strategy of collapsing all of those programs down onto one system. It's called the Digital Common Ground System Army. It is their intelligence component of the warfighting activities. And it is one program now. They've collapsed all the separate stovepipes onto one program. And what they've recognized is that the geospatial information is that integrating framework. So ESRI is part of that program, and it's a phenomenal program. It's a very successful program. It's got great leadership. It's got great vision, and ESRI is providing that foundation, which then allows all the other intelligence to be brought together in an integrated system, not a number of separate systems. We're also seeing the same thing happening in the command and control world, where they've had different command and control systems for many different activities, artillery, air defense, or whatever. And they're now collapsing those down into much more a central command and control system, a single vehicle architecture, a single mobile architecture for dismounted personnel. And again, they're trying to collapse those multiple command and control systems down onto a much smaller number. And then the third thing that makes sense is, in the past we've always had this separation between ops and intel, whether the military would say between the G2 and the G3, or the J2 and the J3. And it's actually been a sort of religious war almost between those two organizations. That makes no sense. And in the US, they now talk about the ops intel convergence. They want to bring those together, which for us was actually quite funny because we really showed them a geospatial enterprise, but we overlaid it with a graphic that says this is your intel piece and this is your operations piece. And when they said, well, we really want to converge them, we said, well, we'll just take the overlay off because really it's a continuous system.
It was already there to begin with.
It was already there, and actually. One of our founder, our president, Jack Dangeman, one of his messages is that GIS is an enabling technology that brings people together and breaks down barriers. And we were actually able to take that message to the Army and say, just at the time that you're thinking of bringing down barriers, let us show you how geospatial technology as an enterprise, as an end-to-end system, can enable that. So it's actually a very exciting time for the technology and the customers as they're beginning to understand that. And that's, again, one reason why I'm here, because I think we have a lot of messages that technology is very mature to help that. And now what we want to do is help them govern that transition to enterprise, and at the same time, not just the vision of an enterprise organization, but some of the new architectures like the cloud.
So is that then the next thing we can expect to see from ESRI? What can we expect to see coming out? That'd be a nice way to round this off.
I think what you're going to see is a much more focus on helping customers understand how to look at GIS as an ecosystem. In the past, we've often supported customers in their requests to plug geospatial technology into separate programs, almost as an ancillary technology. And I think what you're going to see is the whole organization, but the technology and our activities geared to talking to the enterprise. So trying to help customers understand that it's in their best interest to look at the return on investment, the efficiencies they can gain by looking at geospatial across the organization. So I don't think you're going to see anything radical in that respect. But what's really going to enable that is the ability for people to discover information, to share that information, and to collaborate. So I would say the most dramatic thing that you're going to see over the next couple of years is the creation of these portals. The US government has just created a portal on the internet to allow US citizens to see all unclassified government geospatial information. That's been a public policy for a long time. They just didn't have a mechanism to do it very efficiently. They had tried, but now through the sort of user interfaces of the portals, the users don't have to rely on a developer to go and build them a web app. They can go and find their own data, they can find their own tools, and they can build their own applications, and they can publish that themselves on the internet. And by the way, all of this infrastructure that we've built is in the cloud. So the cloud architecture and the way it's going to enable the collaboration, the sharing, the discovery by everybody is really the message. It's not just for the GIS professionals anymore. Yes, those people still needed to create the knowledge and maintain the servers, but really now you're going to see this explosion in the use of geospatial information, and not just for dots on maps, where am I, where's my house, but actually for more complex analysis, which after all is the goal here, is to take information and turn it into actionable intelligence, which is the whole point about all these intelligence disciplines. We want to bring them together. We want to be able to derive information that isn't immediately obvious so we can take action. But we don't want to put that only in the hands of the specialists or a few people buried in the basement. We want to give that capability to everybody.
As much as I would love to continue, we are going to have to draw this one to a close, I'm afraid. But if people do want to find out more, where can they go?
Well, they can obviously go to esri.com. And on that website there, they can find all of our international offices, which has all the points of contact. So start with esri.com as the website, and through there you can find all of the points of contact anywhere in the world.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for speaking with us, and enjoy the rest of the show.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for your time.
Cheers.